What's that? Yeah. So we are live on LinkedIn now, and we are live with GovindaRaj. By the way, guys, I'm Nitin. I'm the host, and we are doing this session on Masters of Sales, where we invite amazing people and we talk about the journey. So इससे पहले हम ये journey शुरू करें with GovindaRaj, and we just wanted to give a moment कि लोग आ जाएं और join कर लें. उसके बाद हम बातें करेंगे बहुत सारी गोविंद के साथ. इन द मीन टाइम आप में से कोई अगर कमेंट करके बता दे हमें प्लीज कि इफ यू कुड हियर अस, आपको आवाज आ रही है, अच्छे से आ रही है, हम दो चेहरे दिख रहे हैं, तो दैट वुड बी अमेजिंग. सो अगर आप कमेंट में प्लीज बता दो तो दैट वुड बी रियली हेल्पफुल. एनी वन ऑफ यू कुड डू दैट.
Yeah, Nitin, I'll do a sound test. You can just call me Govind.
Govind? Thank you, Sahil. Thanks a lot for confirming. We'll just stay put for another few seconds. उसके बाद we will start. The good people live, around 50 people are already live listening to it. Thank you guys, thank you for joining. कुछ seconds और दे दो, फिर उसके बाद बढ़िया सी बात. Great, thanks a lot everyone for confirming, and इतने सारे लोगों ने अब तो बोल दिया हमें कि आवाज अच्छे से आ रही है. Thank you so much. चलिए. Hi Govind, welcome again.
Thank you, Nitin. Sorry, I think there was a bit of a glitch. Sorry for that.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Thanks a lot. And by the way, guys, I am Nitin Bajaj. I'm the host for today's session. And we are doing this session with GovindaRaj, aka Govind, who is, head enterprise marketing at Vodafone India Limited. So अभी हम गोविंद से बहुत सारी बातें करने वाले हैं, आज समझने वाले हैं, who he as a person, क्या है वो, क्या करते हैं अपनी day to day life में, how is running enterprise marketing at Vodafone or perhaps the telecom industry at large, and उनकी पुरानी जर्नी यहाँ से यहाँ तक की कैसे रही है. तो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल थैंक यू सो मच फॉर जॉइनिंग गोविंद. मैं थोड़ा सा ऑडियंस को ये बता देता हूँ आपके बारे में, 2-3 लाइंस जो आपकी प्रोफाइल रीड करके हमें समझ में आई, थोड़ा सा मैं बताता हूँ, उसके बाद देन विल कम टू यू एंड लर्न फ्रॉम यू मोर अबाउट योर जर्नी सो फार. So guys, everyone who is listening, so Govind is a marketing professional, a graduate from alumni from Ahemdabad, and he has been working with Vodafone now, which is Vodafone Idea Limited, for over a decade as the enterprise marketing head. And he has expertise in B2B marketing, business strategy, product management, C-level engagement, and whatnot. And दूसरी भाषा में बोलो तो he's simply a marketing fanatic who has worked and left commendable impressions in companies like Siemens, Wipro, Deloitte, IMI Mobile, and Microland. Govind is also a member of National Council for Marketing and Branding, Mumbai, and Advisory Board India. So that he is a helpful mentor, while some say he remains a advocacy. But I'm going to introduce him as a power package. Thank you, and very, very warm welcome to you, Govind. How are you doing today?
Hey, thanks, Nitin. I hope you can hear me. Lovely to be with you on this show. Yes, I think enjoying the rare winter in Mumbai, doing excellent.
Okay, आप मुझे ये बताओ, आपको गोविंद बोलूं या गोविंदाराज बोलूं, क्या बोलूं मैं आपको?
Just call me Govind, Nitin.
अच्छा, इसके पीछे कुछ स्टोरी है नाम के पीछे?
Well, I think I mean my name has an extra A, which is Govinda D. There is an A after D, which is not supposed to be there. Now, in,
अच्छा.
in the places where I come from, I think they used to be so familiar writing in Telugu and they would translate that into English. So there
Hmm.
got the extra A added. But otherwise, my name is Govind and Raj, so you can just call me Govind.
ओके ग्रेट, चलो ये क्लैरिफिकेशन तो हमें मिल गई है. एनीवेज, तो गोविंद, कुछ अपने बारे में बताइए. लाइक आपके दोस्त आपको कैसे जानते हैं, हु यू आर एज अ पर्सन.
Well, I think these days we end up spending more time with colleagues and less time with friends. I wish the equations are
हम्म.
different or balanced, but I think both would know me well, truly and personal, because I think
हम्म.
the style of working is a lot more to do with working with people than being like a leader or a manager. So I think
हम्म.
couple of one thing that stood with me when someone works with me and says that you are an unconventional corporate person.
ओके.
So I did go and ask them, what do you mean by it? They said that
या.
you're not a straight jacketed functional guy and you are supposed to do this and kind of you stick to that. You are pretty fluid in your way of working, and a little bit of past of having worked with startups probably has rubbed on to the corporate world. So what I mean by it, I think, is you're a little more entrepreneurial in work and you're actually doing few things which are probably not called out in your JD stroke role. So
हम्म.
to that extent, I think you are a little more entrepreneurial, and maybe that's what strikes them to say that it's unconventional.
हम्म.
And second, on a deeply personal level, I think a lot of them find me a wannabe. So
ओके.
you can say, jack of many but master of few. But yeah, I think a variety of things has always kept me excited in life, both at work and personally as well. So I keep trying new things. So that's what people would know me
तो
for.
तो ये जो लोग वाना भी कहते हैं आपको, ये व्हाट इज दैट पर्टिकुलर थिंग दैट यू आर ऑब्सेस्ड अबाउट, मतलब क्या ऐसी चीज है जिसको देख के आपको लोग बोलते हैं कि यार ही इज अ वाना बी इन सम सेंस.
Yeah, so the wannabe part, I think, is coming from uh, a deep rooted philosophy that if you want to excel at anything, you got to be multidisciplinary in your approach. So what
हम्म.
I mean is, I think if you're just looking at marketing, for example, is it art or science? Some would say it's probably science, but I would
हम्म.
argue saying it's both. And where do you pick that inspirations that probably orient you towards thinking of it as an art?
हम्म.
So either by reading or doing different things, meeting exciting, very different people who are not probably you're not supposed to meet. I think those really
हम्म.
open up your faculties, which are probably not kind of very very evident. So I
हम्म.
think you're forcing yourself to a multidisciplinary approach, and that's what probably makes it a wannabe, because you're not going to be perfect in or an expert in everything, but you just want to know a little of everything and see whether you're able to connect the dots. So I probably think that is a wannabe equation for me.
Okay, great. So you have been in Ahemdabad, which is obviously the top-notch institute, not just in India but Asia. Even world recognizes Ahemdabad as to be a top fantastic institute for management degree. तो मतलब एक छोटे शहर से निकल के अहमदाबाद की जर्नी, how did you ended up into Ahmedabad? Were you always a very bright student, या एकदम कुछ अलग सा जोश या कुछ चमका बीटेक के टाइम पे या आपकी ग्रेजुएशन के टाइम पे कि आपको एकदम जोश आया और वहां पहुंच गए? ये अहमदाबाद की जर्नी कहाँ से आई?
Well, I don't think it was that well planned.
हम्म.
Let me share a bit of, I think, obviously your intent was after having graduated from NIT Warangal, which
Yes.
was in my
Yeah.
times REC Warangal. It was obviously a good engineering college, and I think you got very diverse exposure. But yeah, but I think then I started working in Bangalore in Siemens.
हम्म. हम्म.
It was in the software development, but we were working in telecom space for Deutsche Telekom. But the urge to be more on the business side was always there right from engineering college days, to the extent that I dabbled with a course called entrepreneurship in college. I did fairly poor. That is one of the lowest scoring subjects I've taken in engineering. But I
So
think I just felt
NIT, I'm sorry, NIT Warangal में उस टाइम पे एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप कोर्स था?
there was, and I remember
That's
that
so.
the topic I picked was how do you create Yagi Uda antennas in one of the places around Warangal, and it was such a poorly built business case that I was refused kind of any
हम्म.
good grade. But coming
हम्म.
back to the point, I think the urge to probably do an MBA was always there. But it did
Hmm.
take time. It took me like 5 years because there was work and probably there was a bit of a travel. But finally, when it happened, I think I was just glad that probably I made it to IMEA, because after many years of work ex, you kind of get tapered, and probably
Yeah.
you have to kind of push yourself to be as sharp as some of the your other batchmates are going to be. So I
Hmm.
definitely think it was not a greatly planned journey, but always had a passion to do an MBA, and finally it happened in 2003.
राइट। आप मुझे ये बताओ, बिल्कुल चिल होके बताना कि रैगिंग ली आपने या नहीं ली एनआईटी वारंगल में?
एनआईटी वारंगल में तो यार खूब रैगिंग करवाई. मतलब
अच्छा।
I remember in those days we used to count the number of it was fairly physical, by the way.
हाँ।
So the guys with one of the highest ranking of slaps, as we call it. So
ओह।
I was probably in the top two or three, and so but from there, but in the year two, obviously you get a chance to rag, and year three you kind of mellow down, and year four is pretty much like
हाँ।
a coach or a mentor.
हम्म।
My my approach to ragging probably was kind of test the other person on the patience. It was more bit of a mental aspects of ragging.
हम्म।
Put some kind of situations and go and harass them for a while and have a long chat. So I mean,
तो
it was
ये
not
तो
physical.
सेल्स 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 रोल से तो काफी सिमिलैरिटीज आ रही हैं फिर इसमें कि यू टेस्ट द पेशेंस एनीवेज व्हाइल यू आर इन द मार्केट, राइट?
Yes, you do, but I think you are also smart at it. But maybe during ragging, you have a license to the other person has just got to
हाँ।
listen to you. But in the sales role, I think you got to vie for the customer's attention. There, I didn't have the
हम्म।
challenge. But you're right. In
हाँ।
similarities, one could.
करेक्ट। एनीवेज आप मुझे ये बताइए, यू हैव चेंज्ड। आप आपने काफी मल्टीनेशनल कंपनीज में काम किया है, राइट? बड़े बड़े नाम में आपने काम किया है। तो हाउ डिड यू यू नो लाइक द चेंज और कंट्रास्ट वर्किंग इन सच अ डाइवर्स और डिफरेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन? वो चेंज कितना आसान था वो करना कि आज मैं इस कंपनी में हूँ, कल दूसरी कंपनी में हूँ, थर्ड, एंड देन स्टिकिंग टू वोडाफोन फॉर सच अ लार्ज। तो ये ओवरऑल चेंज आपने कैसे मैनेज किया?
So let me share a bit of my career graph. Again, like I said,
हम्म।
it is not, if you look at it, I think the initial part post MBA looks like there were multiple jumps. And I think let me share that part of the career, because then it makes sense to why Vodafone
राइट।
stuck on to me, or I stuck on to Vodafone. So my
हम्म।
career graph is between, I think, large companies. In between, there are two startups or mid-sized company, and then a large company.
हम्म। हम्म।
And the key reason, I think, is I think the startup buzz was even there in even in 2006, 2007, but probably not of the same intensity and same lexicon that we have today. But it was definitely there. And I think
हम्म।
some of those companies were probably trying to be more global, trying to be more bold in those approaches. And
हम्म।
telecom was, I always thought telecom was my calling. And with Deloitte in consulting, probably I didn't kind of fancy myself beyond a couple of years. So I kind of made a switch. When I made a
हम्म।
switch, it was, I mean, it was fairly an interview with an entrepreneur, and the conversations there are very different. It's not a corporate interview style. So it's more
राइट।
assessing, do you have the appetite to burn yourself and, stay focused on driving business.
हम्म।
So
हम्म।
but again, in those days, I think the rush of blood was too much, right? I mean, you just think that somewhere the strategy is not according to what you think, and you kind of make those moves which are little abrupt in my view. I did that as
हम्म।
well. The switch to Microland was equally a very different style. We met in
हम्म।
Taj Krishna in Hyderabad, and the interview was fairly very different. And they were creating role for me. It was like with probably
हम्म।
some things that
हम्म।
only startups and entrepreneurs can do versus large corporates.
राइट।
Again, that journey was my first induction into the B2B. So mostly
हम्म।
Indian market, working with CIOs or kind of creating new product lines and service lines. So
राइट।
in my view, the first kind of the big jump was between working in startups, and in between, probably the least told story about me. I think I tried a startup which didn't work, but I'll
हम्म।
come back to that.
हम्म।
I think the switch to Vodafone was a little calibrated, because I said, let me go and make some money. Some of
हम्म।
the startup adventures probably were not paying off,
हम्म।
and so I think Vodafone happened. But obviously, one does a lot of calibration and research, because you're trying to see whether you're going to fit there.
हम्म।
So there is a lot of cultural fit aspects that you look at. And some of the interviews do tell you a lot. Some of your friends talk about it a lot. So culture sometimes definitely manifests itself beyond the company's walls. So I think the shift was definitely anxious coming back to telecom, and I always knew that telecom was a superbly fast-paced environment, very dynamic. So shifting from mid-sized IT company which worked at a different pace to telecom, which gives you a crash course in how do you live by the day, was
Hmm.
definitely a dramatic shift. So that stays with me,
Hmm.
but obviously one kind of one tunes himself or herself to the industry and the company. So right now you can call me a little seasoned, but yeah, the shift was always those points of shifts were always anxious as to are you doing the right
Hmm.
thing, getting back to corporate, are you doing the right thing, shifting to a startup. So
Hmm.
I went through those curves, and I think so that probably I mean I don't know whether they're worthy experiments, but yeah, the experiments did happen in the early part of the career.
Hmm. Hmm. आपने एक बहुत अच्छी चीज बोली which is shifting from a IT company to a telecom, which is more on a different culture, बहुत अलग टाइप की इंडस्ट्री हो जाती है compared to an IT sector. तो अब मुझे ये बताओ, you are into marketing, तो what's the major differentiation जो आपको दोनों बीच, यार ये तो बहुत ही अलग चीज हो गई मार्केटिंग में, when you are doing it for Vodafone versus when you were doing it for Microland, क्या मेजर डिफरेंशिएशन लगा आपको?
See, I mean, sometimes I think I'm just lucky that Vodafone or now Vodafone Idea as a company is both a B2B brand and a B2C brand, which means you have a
हम्म.
overarching
हम्म.
brand which is probably much widely known as a consumer brand, and then you're trying to build an
हम्म.
enterprise
हम्म.
brand around it. Versus
राइट.
Microland, which is probably purely for a B2B, and I think you're talking to
हम्म.
more, I would call it the black suit conversations versus probably the youthfulness in this brand is far more you can feel
हम्म.
the
हम्म. हम्म.
vibrancy here.
राइट.
So that's because I think you build that by design. So
हम्म.
and I think that's one of the first differences. Second difference obviously I think is here, given that the kind of customers that we target are in millions, and I mean, for example, today we target SMEs, and many of them can't be named today. So, and hence the
हम्म.
kind of efforts that you put in brand building are fundamentally different from working in a brand where you know that these are your top 300 customers and you win them.
हम्म.
I think you got your game. So I think it's a much more focused effort there in creating
हम्म.
awareness and how you run the marketing as a shop. But here, I think you do a lot more experiments out here, and
हम्म.
you do kind of get exposed and live off the positive effects of the larger brand. So I think those are some of the
हम्म.
differences that come to my mind.
ओके, सो अगर हम सेल्स की भाषा में बोलें तो वहाँ पे आप अकाउंट बेस्ड मार्केटिंग ज़्यादा फोकस करते थे, लाइक यू हैव सर्टेन
Absolutely.
अकाउंट्स दैट यू वर चेजिंग, एंड यहाँ पे आप यू हैव अ ब्रांड, you have a consumer, audience at large that is available at your disposal, that is already aware of your brand recognition, and then out of those bucket you get your enterprise game on top of that.
Yeah,
So
I mean, that's a good
is
point, Nitin. I think
hmm,
here as well, given that we straddle all the way from Sohos all the way to large global corporates and government,
hmm,
what I meant by the variety of marketing programs here, I think, is you blend brand building in SMEs
hmm,
slightly differently, and you work on
hmm,
large corporates almost like an account-based marketing efforts
hmm,
because you're very focused and building an integrated sales and marketing plan. So you get multiple vehicles which are probably different across these two segments,
hmm, hmm,
and that just adds more to the variety. And obviously, I think you do a lot more different things out here.
hmm.
Yeah.
एक चीज आपने इंटरेस्टिंग बोली, जैसे वोडाफोन में ऑब्वियसली यू सेड, मैं डीप डाइव नहीं जाऊंगा, आई ऑब्वियसली नो देयर इज ऑलवेज वी कांट शेयर लॉट ऑफ थिंग्स, बट लेट्स जस्ट टॉक अबाउट ओवरऑल स्ट्रेटजी एज अ लार्ज. तो देयर आर थ्री सेगमेंट्स, एंटरप्राइज हो गया, मिड साइज हो गया, एसएमईज हो गया. अब तीनों को ऑब्वियसली टारगेट करने के डिफरेंट चैनल्स होते हैं और तरीके होते हैं, व्हाइल कोल्ड कॉलिंग मे वर्क ऑन एसएमईज, कोल्ड कॉलिंग मे नॉट वर्क ऑन एंटरप्राइज सेगमेंट. तो कोई एक ऐसी चीज है जो आज आप शेयर करना चाहते हो फ्रॉम योर एक्सपीरियंस एंड विजडम, कि ये चीज तो आपने कॉमन देखी है अक्रॉस ऑल द स्पेक्ट्रम, कि ये चीज तो चलती ही चलती है, चाहे आप कोई भी सेगमेंट उठा लो, ये चीज आपकी चलनी है, स्पेशली इन टर्म्स ऑफ द इंडियन मार्केट आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट, नॉट आउटसाइड इंडिया.
That's a good question. Makes me think. Okay, the one thing that I think has got more pronounced even during pandemic, which is obviously one of the golden rules I would call it in business to human marketing, I think is marketing with empathy. And in that
Hmm.
broad term, I would call it: have you personalized the messaging? Have you kind of understood their industry and the company and the dynamics of whomever you're meeting. I think that personalization of communication and conversation is a common principle across, but obviously you do it
Hmm.
differently because in SMBs, for example, one of the key insights in the segments that we target in Vodafone Idea is that a lot of the companies of small medium businesses are family owned and family run. So when
Hmm.
there is a
Hmm.
generation change from the father to the son or the father to the daughter, obviously there are new ways of working, and we call it, it's a friction point of how do you kind of play into that and help them convince that you are the partner of your choice. So that those nuances,
Hmm.
again,
Hmm.
that again I would call it the empathy factor of how much you understand the business and the dynamics. It works equally well, the same technique, when you're meeting large CIOs or CDOs and CTOs, because
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
first slide
Hmm.
the first slide I remember in most of the conversations that I do, and I do far less of them than before, is my understanding of your business. I'm sure that technique works in SMB and it works in boardrooms, in CEOs meetings or CIO meetings. So you're
Hmm.
putting your cards on the table that I've done some research and I think this is what I understand of your business and its imperatives. So that probably, from my lens, is a technique that
Hmm.
worked constantly.
ओके ओके दैट्स अमेजिंग दैट्स अ ग्रेट इनसाइट आप मुझे ये बताओ कि आपने एक पॉइंट बोला जो मुझे बहुत सुन के मुझे लगा इस पे तो मैं रुक नहीं सकता मेरे को पूछना पड़ेगा like you said that the new generation second generation entrepreneurs have come in especially when you talk about the SMEs अब जिन्होंने घर वालों ने कंपनी खोली अब बच्चे आ गए बड़े हो गए अब वो कंपनी को संभाल रहे हैं एंड डू यू थिंक द डिसीजन मेकिंग आल्सो हैज इम्प्रूव्ड और रिड्यूस्ड बिकॉज ऑफ दैट फैक्टर मतलब पहले आप बड़े लोगों को टारगेट करते थे अब अगर आप उनके बच्चों को टारगेट कर रहे हो कोई कॉन्ट्रास्ट आपको नजर आया कि यार अब फास्ट हो गया है कन्वर्जन या कम हो गया है या बहुत प्रॉब्लम्स आती हैं क्या मेजर डिफरेंशिएशन लगा फर्स्ट जनरेशन और सेकंड जनरेशन को टारगेट करने के बीच में
Yeah, I think couple of things that come to my mind. Again, more pronounced during the pandemic, which was much difficult to call out these
हम्म
as a big call outs pre-pandemic. One
हम्म
is, I think the pace of adoption of technology, and you can call it digital, is probably either it is forced upon you or you have probably decided and carefully calibrated to adopt it. So
हम्म
the decision making on adopting some of the technologies and tools has definitely, like you said, Nitin, far well more pace than before. That's point number one.
हम्म हम्म
Point number two, I think, is earlier probably the decision would have taken time, but you build relationships which are probably lasting.
हम्म
Here, because the information is kind of very well available, your ability to switch partners, which is what I call the switching costs, have become lower in my view, which means that you got to
हम्म
earn and keep the trust. You have to work hard at it because while you've been selected as a supplier of choice, it's very easy for
हम्म
the second year entrepreneur because that person is so
या
well informed of other choices. So I
राइट
think you got to keep earning and working hard on earning the trust is the second
हम्म
part that has got called out. And third, in terms of awareness of technology and whatever aversions that were there before on adopting technology have slowly vaporing out. So that is a pleasant one. And I think if I were to pick one bet in India, I think is the massive opportunity in micro and small medium
हम्म
enterprises in India. So
हम्म
terrific. It's very challenging. I agree. I understand, but it is quite huge.
what works best in targeting these do you think cold email works best cold calling works best क्या है आपके हिसाब से क्या बेस्ट स्ट्रैटेजी रहती है एसएमईज को टारगेट करने में अगर मैं एक कंपनी और मुझे इनको रीच आउट करना है तो और लिमिटेड बजट है स्टार्टअप अभी हम स्टार्टअप के ऊपर आपके पास आने वाले हैं वैसे अबाउट योर स्टार्टअप एक्सपीरियंस एंड जर्नी बट लेट्स जस्ट से इट्स अ फोर प्ले काइंड ऑफ क्वेश्चन कि अगर मैं एक स्टार्टअप हूँ और मुझे एसएमईज को टारगेट करना है व्हाट वुड यू रिकमेंड कि खासकर एसएमईज को टारगेट करने के लिए व्हाट्स द चैनल आई शुड यूज
No, I thought I'll pick few ideas from you. To be honest, I'm still. I would suggest that we are still. I would basically say not suggest that. I think we are still learning
हाँ
the market. I think if you and SME is a very broad stroke. Let me admit that
हम्म
first.
हम्म
You got manufacturing, you got retail, you got
राइट
healthcare, hospitality.
राइट
That is one. Second, I think is fragmentation across India and tier
राइट
one and tier two and tier three. Third, I think is big learning for us is the language and the channel of communication.
हम्म
Now, part of me is divided to say that I have seen digital work. What I mean by digital, I think is if you're looking at some of those social platforms and some of those merchant platforms, you would find it not so difficult to target and derive
Hmm.
value out of those marketing campaigns or efforts that you do.
Hmm.
Second, part of me also thinks that sometimes nothing substitutes a face to face, be it SMEs, even though they are wide and deep. So
Hmm.
to the extent that old school ideas of, can I create what I call as SME bus and go and meet those entrepreneurs in those catchment
Hmm.
areas or SEZs,
Hmm.
I think there is still a value there. Now, the
Hmm.
only question probably, which is we don't try too often in B2B, is the print as a media. But otherwise, the other, in my view, it's going to be a bit of a hybrid. You're going to have
Hmm.
both these vehicles of outreach still available for marketing to play on. And I think
Hmm.
one should keep all the vehicles at hand.
इस पे और भी बहुत सारे क्वेश्चंस है बट लेट्स जस्ट मूव टू योर स्टार्टअप जर्नी फॉर नाउ कि आपने आपने जो स्टार्टअप किया इफ यू कुड टॉक मोर अबाउट दैट एंड स्पेशली जो इंटरेस्टिंग पार्ट है समझने वाला दैट working with a company like Vodafone, Microland, which have huge budgets and team to support you for running sales and marketing efforts, versus starting up your own and having I'm assuming very small team and a very less budget obviously. तो वो बहुत कंट्रास्ट वो कैसे किया आपने थोड़ा सा अपने स्टार्टअप के बारे में बताइए एंड हाउ वाज योर जर्नी रनिंग दैट
Yeah, and let me share that, Nitin. And I think let me just put
या
one caveat. I think the idea that we worked on probably was no longer relevant in the current times. To that extent, it's an outdated idea to the audience. But let me give you a bit of a context then. I think then the
hmm.
Indian market had about close to 14 to 15 telcos, um,
Okay.
plethora of plans, prepaid, postpaid, multiple ISPs and broadband operators. So
hmm.
the question, the problem that we were trying to solve, be it an urban or a rural customer, is what is my best fit mobile and broadband plan. So that was a
Hmm.
problem we thought worth solving because it was very confusing to kind of make a choice and the choices, and back then the market was purely making choice based on tariff plan or the price points.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
obviously once you get on and I think then you experience the network and it is contrary to what you were expecting, you then switch, and the switching also was not
Yeah.
so easy. So to that
Right.
extent, that first purchase or the first choice was very important. So the idea that we worked on, and it was a strange team, I would say just a team of two.
Hmm.
I was working with a chartered accountant from New Zealand who I got in touch with in a strange circumstances, but we hit off well, and we were just two of us bootstrapped, putting some our own money on SEO, doing some small little campaigns on Facebook. I
Hmm.
think the beauty, and I think the one thing that I learned there, I think we got about three customers, and they were
Hmm.
not, they were not paying us money, but they were pilot customers. And I remember
Okay.
Beam Cable, which is now called the ACT FiberNet, U Broadband was second, then there was Virgin Mobile back then.
Oh, these are huge names.
Yeah, so I think the effort of I think the satisfaction of putting effort and winning that pilot customer
Hmm.
probably nothing matches, right? And
Yeah,
so that's
yeah.
I'm learning. So I think so that excitement of building, and obviously the number of hours you spent is not something you count because I think you're just driven by the passion to set up the business. But the big learning for me was we always felt that the revenue model can always be built later. Now,
Hmm.
I would kind of, if I were to wind back the clock and do it differently, I think I would walk into an idea with sort of a semi clarity on where my revenue model is going to be coming
Hmm.
from.
Hmm.
Otherwise, technology for the sake of technology is good, but I don't think it pays off. So the payoff didn't happen. And the second
Hmm.
learning, I think, is we gave up probably a little too early because we felt
Hmm.
that let's go back to the corporate because we're not going to make money here.
Hmm.
Um, so the learning, I think, is that you got to either pivot or build on to better idea rather than
Hmm.
stopping the entrepreneurship. So I think that's what the learning I will leave this audience with. But like I said, the
Hmm.
idea may not be relevant in the current times, but the learnings that I picked up are probably thought worth sharing with you all. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, if there is ever again a chance or a passion to do it, I think why not?
Sure, that's great. So आपने बताया you were two people back then when you started, you and the other person who was the chartered accountant. अभी कितने लोग हैं? How much is the team that you're handling right now? Vodafone? How
Okay,
big?
the team here, marketing teams are usually lean. My team is about
Hmm.
13 people.
Okay.
We call ourselves the marketing mavericks. A little bit
Hmm.
about the team. I think they're diverse set of people from different regions of India. Not that just that part. I think they are very from various disciplines, which I love the most because I think the diversity of thought that comes into the discussions makes the whole thing more rewarding and enriching. So that's a little bit about the team. We call ourselves the marketing mavericks. Yeah.
Hmm. एंड डू यू ऑल्सो फाइंड द कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स दैट यूजुअली हम लोग सुनते हैं मार्केटिंग और सेल्स के वालों के बीच में कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स होते रहते हैं कि मार्केटिंग वाले तो कुछ नहीं करते बस मेल लिखते हैं और सेल्स वाले बोलते हैं कि अलग ही चल रहा है इनका अपने आप को पता नहीं क्या समझता है तो डू यू आल्सो हैव एक्सपीरियंसेस
Yeah. And Nitin, I hope you can hear me still.
या आई कैन
Yeah.
हियर यू
No, I mean that's a great friction, right? I mean, it's a and I think
या
one that you go and ask any pundit saying how do you resolve it. I think they said live with it. So how do you live with it? So I think it's a bit of in my view it's a bit of a give and take because there are times when marketing should challenge sales, and there will be times when sales will come more demanding and probably it might seem like coming to ride on a high horse. But in my view, I think what comes out of that friction is something more beautiful. If the plan can be integrated at a point where you say, okay, this is a worthy of an idea to give in or a worthy of an idea to push forward, um, the outcomes that happen after that, I think I've seen the other side of it where the outcomes are very beautiful. But I would probably encourage that I think fundamentally both of us are wired differently, right? I mean, so one is more pushy by nature, marketing is little probably needs some space, little more time. So it's going to be a balancing act. And I think some of the great techniques I think are you kind of build some platforms that both of us kind of ideate and build the idea together, um, and and leave some of the other things to the natural forces. So in my view, I think that's one thing that I love about the job, that I come to the day saying, okay, what's going to be the sales demand for the day or for the week.
ग्रेट आपने आउटकम और आइडियाज की बात की अभी हम बात करते हैं कोई ऐसा एक्सपेरिमेंट जिससे आप कुछ एक्सपेक्ट नहीं कर रहे थे बट दैट केम ऑन टू बिकम अ वेरी गुड सक्सेसफुल मार्केटिंग कैंपेन कोई ऐसा आपको याद आ रहा है लाइक व्हिच यू वर you anyways keep on doing a lot of experiments right every day in marketing when you do that but कोई ऐसा जो बहुत ही स्टैंड आउट हो गया और उससे इतनी एक्सपेक्टेशंस ना रही हो do you have any anecdote to share on that
Yeah, I think in B2B, I don't think I would call it too many crazy ideas. I mean, we do experiment a lot, but I think when you kind of put money behind some of the things that you do, you walk in with little more calibrated minds and expectations. But what I can
hmm
tell from the experience of what really stood out in my view, I think is very early days. I don't know how well established was LinkedIn in 2017-18. Probably it was well established, but
hmm
the account based marketing that you talked about, Nitin, and till then I think the definition of it is how do you run a workshop or an advisory board for the customer, go and meet the customer and do it face to
hmm
face. But the experiment that we did or the campaign that we did was how do you run ABM on LinkedIn. So which means I can share the details out here. One is, these are the 2000 accounts that you want to target. These are the set of people. You can
hmm
actually name your stakeholders. And these
right
are the decision makers and these are the influencers. And I'm just talking B2B language, but you can probably equate that to B2C as well in your own sense. And we walked in saying, okay, let's go to try this platform. And LinkedIn seems to be where the audience are hanging out, but the results are quite amazing. Even in those days where the algorithms were still improving, and I think LinkedIn is a much better platform now, results were quite amazing. You're able to reach the audience, get the message across, get quality leads, which is probably the holy grail of a marketing campaign. In my mind, walked in with very low expectation, thinking that we're going to learn a bit, but we ended up saying, okay, LinkedIn proves to be a great platform for our audience engagement, and I think it just hopefully becomes a mainstay in our marketing plans over the years.
ओके ओके दैट्स ग्रेट मतलब बहुत सारे एक्सपेरिमेंट्स करते हो आप राइट यूर इन मार्केटिंग तो आपको ऐसा लगता है दैट द इंडियन मार्केट इज रिस्पॉन्सिव टू ऑल ऑफ दीज मार्केटिंग स्ट्रेटजीज दैट यू ट्राई और कोई ऐसा सजेशन दैट यू वांट टू गिव टू द मार्केटिंग फोक्स के बडिंग मार्केटियर्स को आप कुछ मार्केटिंग स्ट्रेटजी के ऊपर बताना चाहो
Yeah. So in I mean, there are two parts to the response. One, I think,
Hmm.
is if you are thinking that B2B brands sometimes are black suited, maybe not as exciting as
Hmm.
B2C, rethink about it, because I can give tons of examples. I think there are many B2B startups out of the many unicorns that we have today. I think around 30 of them
Hmm.
are
Hmm.
probably B2B. So
Hmm.
they're redefining some of the marketing principles and how they bring the vibrancy of building a brand into the B2B. So you can learn a lot from what they're doing. Second,
Hmm.
one of the other brands that I admire globally and in India is a Salesforce. So their
Right.
approach to
Right.
B2B branding and marketing is quite refreshing. Now,
Right.
coming to the experiments, and I think and specifically talking about India as a market, and while we've done some experiments on chatbot based marketing or conversational
Hmm.
AI and those kind of new engines, one thing that
Hmm.
probably I would advise, I think all of us should pick it up, is voice marketing. And probably as an Indian
Okay.
market, and coming back to your point, Nitin, on how do you really tap SMEs, is it how which channel you want to use? So audio stroke voice is a channel worth exploring. We haven't done enough experiments, not that I have experiences to share here, but
Hmm.
that seems to be a channel worth putting some effort and innovation on. So if I were to
Okay.
pick one in marketing, I think please add that and see the results. Of course, there are so many new topics that have entered our dictionaries, meta and all of that. I'm sure many of us would try it out, but probably voice is something that I would pick.
That's great. I mean, I think anyways, with the Alexa, Siri, all of these coming in and pushing the voice era onto us, so definitely voice का तो एक अलग ही revolution है आज में. And
Yeah.
since anyways we are doing podcast, तो मेरे को लगता है कि वो वैसी थीम मैच करती है हमारी. दूसरा मुझे ये बताइए कि लाइक इतने सारे आपने मार्केटिंग स्ट्रेटजीज की हमने बात की. वी टॉक अबाउट चैटबॉट, वी टॉक अबाउट वॉइस, वी टॉक अबाउट लिंक्डइन, ABM approach over LinkedIn, tapping in the selected demographics of people that we want to tap into. But कोई ऐसी मार्केटिंग स्ट्रैटेजी या चैनल जो आपको लगता है यार ये तो सालों साल से चले ही आ रहा है और ये छोड़ना ही नहीं है. मतलब आप कोई कल को किसी और कंपनी में चले जाओ और आपको बोले कि यार मार्केटिंग स्टार्ट करनी है आज से, तो आप सबसे पहले क्या सोचते हो कि ये वाला तो होना ही चाहिए, इसके तो छोड़ ही नहीं सकते. कोई ऐसा जो अभी तक चल रहा है और चलता रहेगा.
I mean, so some bit of a theory, and then I'll come to my point. Okay, so I always think that the
Hmm.
marketing career should be built on the three R's. And
Hmm.
my football analogy is the fancied Brazilian team of Ronaldo, Rivaldo, and Ronaldinho. So
Oh.
in the marketing parlance, it is revenue, relationships, and reputation. Yeah. So,
Hmm.
but if I were to pick one thing that probably withstands the test of time, I think it's relationships.
Hmm.
um, that's where I think the sales and marketing come together to see whether you're widening the relationship, be it a consumer or an enterprise or a SMB, or deepening the relationship. And I think marketing
Hmm.
plays a tremendous role in enabling or creating platforms where you're engaging with the customer beyond certain known areas where sales typically engages. I mean, you might want to go and
Hmm.
pitch, but that's only appealing to one faculty of the customer, which is probably intellectual and buying pattern. But do you know that there is a persona out there like Nitin? You might have certain other passion where I think I would like to know you more and build a relationship. So
Right.
those are the areas where I think marketing can kind of make a big dent. And I would pick, if there is one thing that I would pick which probably withstands and universally please applies to all the sectors, is relationships.
Hmm. तो how does a young company build a relationship? कैसे बिल्ड करो रिलेशनशिप? हम बात करते हैं रिलेशनशिप्स की, बट मतलब देयर आर मेनी ऑफ टू डू. कोई ऐसा एक आपको लगता है ये अच्छा तरीका रहता है रिलेशनशिप बिल्ड करने का?
No, I think there are some ground principles where you as an individual and the company and the brand that you're representing
Hmm.
um, stand for undeniably and committedly. One is trust, integrity. So and I think
Hmm.
trust and integrity. So I think what I mean by it, I think, is if you're committing to certain things, whether by virtue of a product sale or a service that you're committed, are you delivering? And I think that's a fundamental thing. If you're delivering the value that you're promised, I think you start earning the trust. And trust actually gives
Hmm.
you the, probably it's a differentiator. So it's very difficult to build trust, but very easy to lose as well. But I think over
Hmm.
time, the relationships get built because once you are able to deliver value and establish the trust, the customer becomes your advocate, and that's
Hmm.
part. That's a stage of relationship where I think you probably arrived when the customer is advocating about you, your brand, and your products.
Hmm.
So it's a journey to reach from relationship with the customer to engagement to being an advocate. So I would probably split into the three
Hmm.
parts, and you have to do multiple things. Deliver the right experience, deliver value, kind of show trust at every moment of truth, and probably it's a hard work. I'm not sure there is a shortcut and a formula for it, but over experience, that's what I learned.
ओके ओके ग्रेट दो तीन और क्वेश्चंस हैं फिर उसके बाद हम विल गो टू द ऑडियंस इफ दे वांट टू आस्क एनीथिंग फ्रॉम यू विल टेक अप दोस क्वेश्चंस एज वेल बट आपने एक पोस्ट में अपने एक कोट लिखा था तो उस कोट के बारे में मैं एक बार पहले कोट पढ़ता हूँ और फिर आपसे पूछते हैं कि यू नो व्हाट डू यू मीन बाय दैट कैन यू एलैबोरेट ऑन दैट सो यू मेंशनड द रेवेन्यू अर्निंग मार्केटिंग डॉलर नीड्स टू स्वेट मोर टू शो आउटकम्स तो ये आपने अपनी पोस्ट में डाला था तो इसके बारे में थोड़ा बताएंगे लाइक व्हाट डू यू मीन बाय
Okay, so you're making me spill some beans, Nitin. But
दैट
I think it's well understood. I think the when a marketing goes and asks for a budget, the first person to question you is your CFO, right? I mean, show
राइट
me the outcomes, and marketing is a cost function. So
या
where are the revenue linked outcomes? So I think the point that I think I strongly come to believe, I think, is your marketing spends are probably divided into brand building and certain many other things, insights and things like customer engagements and campaigns, etc. So this point is largely about, I think, the money where you're spending on, where you're saying that I will do. Let's say I'm just giving a very basic example so that we all understand what I'm saying. Campaigns, events. Now, in the past, I could get away saying, okay, I've run a great campaign. Talk to me after 1 month, and I'll come and tell you the result of what happened. But today, in the digital world, it's like the data is in your face every half an hour, every 1 hour. I mean, at the
राइट
frequency that you want. So it just made it more exciting and difficult to kind of have those conversations. So the conversation that we would love to have is, okay, I spent some money. I think it worked. It didn't work, and have a very factual based conversation. And when you want to do that, what you're doing, I think, is forcing is you're kind of thinking that much hard during the planning before you do the event or the campaign as to what exactly is the returns or business outcomes that you want to drive, and you hold yourself accountable for it. You don't need to say that I've done this but sales hasn't extracted value. Those conversations probably are, I would call it, not so mature enough anymore. So I think right now the world and the tools and the technologies allow you to have a very objective and fact based outcome. So why don't you capitalize on it and sweat that dollar that more? So I think you're going to be more prudent about where you're spending, even if you think you designed it big, but you learn very quickly in 2 days that this probably is not delivering. For example, in one of the campaigns that we did, I won't name the channel which didn't work, but in 4 5 days we came to know that the channel probably, that platform hasn't delivered. So I think you got the right to pause it, reorient the spends elsewhere. So you're basically making that dollar you're putting tomorrow sweat more. So I would probably say that, it's more of a prudence, and obviously it helps you in your CFO conversations that you look good with evidences and outcomes. So
राइट
who would deny? Yeah.
Right, great. In the meantime, before we jump on to the last two, three questions, audience, जिसको भी कुछ पूछना है from Govind about his journey, about enterprise marketing, B2B sales, telecom industry as a whole, or perhaps other things that you know got to know about him during the podcast or video. तो आपको जो भी पूछना है, please comment in the below chat. आपको कमेंट करेंगे तो वंस आई एम डन विद द क्वेश्चंस एक दो रह गए हैं जो उसके बाद आई विल आस्क योर क्वेश्चन डायरेक्टली फ्रॉम गोविंद so if you are listening to this and you want to ask anything now is the time please put in your comments and we'll come back to your questions as well very shortly तो गोविंद coming back to you uh, ये बताइए कि which tools सेल्स में या मार्केटिंग में कोई ऐसे दो तीन टूल हैं जो स्टैंड आउट करते हैं जो आपके बहुत फेवरेट्स हैं जो आप बोलते हो यार ये तो सबको यूज करने चाहिए
So I think there would be many, because I think standard response would be, I think marketing automation is a good tool because it gets you closer to designing campaign yourself and you are pretty hands on in
Hmm.
coding the whole campaign and stuff. But I think there's a great degree of fascination, and it's a proven tool, and I personally love it. But I think what I've learned to love probably is social listening tools. So
Okay.
they're brutally candid, and they tell you your sentiment of your brand, or where your conversations picked up engagements, where your conversations didn't pick up. It is so much in the face that it initially took me some time to kind of adapt to it. But once you adapt to
Hmm.
it, I think you kind of learn the power of the tool, and
Hmm.
you can pretty much play the whole field much better. I would pick, I think that social listening is something that I've kind of fallen in love with.
Okay, but don't you think that for a brand like Vodafone, obviously social listening makes more sense versus a brand like Microland, wherein the audience demographic is very different. दोनों में तो काफी contrast रहेगा.
I think somewhere I'll probably get to my holy grail, right? The holy grail that I want
Hmm.
is, like, okay, let's say I'm making a call on a CIO,
Hmm.
and I mean, it might look a little creepy, but skip the creepy part of what I'm saying. Is I
Hmm.
would like to know, and Nitin, you are the CIO that I'm meeting, so I would like to know, Nitin, what is your view on adopting 5G, for example, or IoT? And
Hmm.
can I
Hmm.
know that much more about the kind of articles that you've written? It's more of a listening of a different kind that would apply to B2B
Hmm.
companies versus what a normal consumer brand would
Got
do.
it.
And I think
Got
the
it.
tools are constantly learning what's your sentiment, what's your
Hmm.
view, where are your biases, etc. Beyond knowing your wallet share, how much are you going to spend next year, I would personally love that part. And somewhere, if the tools
Hmm.
evolve, and I think there are many tools which are evolving, I
Hmm.
would think there's probably the synergy that you can arrive at in what I call as a social listening for both B2B and B2C.
करेक्ट. एक लास्ट क्वेश्चन पूछते हैं, उसके बाद हमारे पास ऑलरेडी क्वेश्चंस आने शुरू हो चुके हैं ऑडियंस से. फिर हम उसके ऊपर जंप ऑन करेंगे. वैसे भी टाइम ऑलरेडी बहुत ज़्यादा स्ट्रेच हो गया है.
Sure.
तो लास्ट क्वेश्चन ये है दैट हाउ इज़ योर एक्सपीरियंस वर्किंग विद यूर अ मेंबर ऑफ एडवाइजरी बोर्ड इंडिया. तो वो क्या एक्सपीरियंस था, वहाँ कैसे पहुँच गए आप?
Simply, Nitin, I think there is an urge to kind of get in touch with some of the bright minds out there. I think it's probably out of humility that you know that probably you know only this much, and how do you learn or pick some of the practices from
Hmm.
other stalwarts. So these advisory boards or these councils are actually a very small group of people,
Hmm.
some of the brightest in the country or across the region. So
Hmm.
I think it only exposes you to probably various industries, different methods. You don't need to every time experiment yourself. You can also do it by learning from others. So it's to
Hmm.
me as an opportunity to rub shoulders with probably some of the brighter minds out there. So that probably is the reason why I gravitate to some of them.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for sharing the insights about that. अब हम आते हैं ऑडियंस के क्वेश्चंस के ऊपर. आई थिंक वी आर ऑलरेडी ऑलमोस्ट टचिंग 50 मिनट्स ऑफ आवर
Yeah,
कन्वर्सेशन. तो कुछ थोड़ा टाइम हमारी ऑडियंस को भी देते हैं. आई एम हाइलाइटिंग द क्वेश्चंस ऑन द स्क्रीन एज वेल.
sure.
So first question is from Mohammed Akib Khan. I'm hoping I've pronounced your name, correctly, Mohammed. Pardon me if I'm not. I'm so sorry for that. But let's just jump onto the question. He says, "Excellent discussions. It's been really fruitful. Thank you, Mohammed. Would like to understand a bit about B2B sales for export marketing, international marketing. So, any insights when you're doing, B2B sales for export or international marketing? उसके बारे में do you have any insights, or how do you tackle, or how do you build a good company or business for exports or international arena?
Yeah. No, a great question, Akib. And let me admit that I'm not a sales expert, but let me give a marketing answer that helps sales probably.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm assuming for a moment you're talking about a product oriented trade company, which is probably exporting either products or services. So, one I think is you kind of known as a brand or a company? Does the market know you? Which means you probably start with putting some efforts on the ground in building a bit of a brand in those markets.
Hmm.
Second, I think some of the tools that you have today, which is I think I refer to an example of marketing automation. So
Hmm.
before you kind of put your sales army on the ground, I think
Hmm.
there's a lot you can learn by using the power of these tools to run your campaign, understand how is a customer engaging with you or the prospects are engaging with you. And a lot can be done maybe using inside sales, in my view, before you
Hmm.
really put sales, because take a decision to put sales when you're convinced that there is a great opportunity and you think there is a lot of productivity linked gains that you can get. So I would think that the starting journey could be little bit with marketing, test it out, and if it works, go ahead and dive into the full-fledged sales there. So I think the other nuances that come different because you're based in one market, and do you really know how the other markets are? Probably yes, you need to be a little aware of the cultural aspects of what works in those markets. I think having bit of a, I would call it marketing rainmakers or small consultants out there or freelancers out there. There's no harm in trying that route. But yeah, so I don't know if I answered you, but I would think that's a decent first step.
Okay, great. Coming on to the second question, I'm highlighting that it's from Neha. How do you see the future of digital marketing?
Yeah, I
I
mean,
think it's very bright.
no, Neha, I think if you are in the digital marketing space, you are in the right space. I'll tell you why. Because look at any report, forget report. I think you can see it commonsensically as well. 30% of the Indian advertising spend is on digital advertising. I'm just talking purely about India. And that has just overtaken print as the second largest spend based channel. So, first is obviously TV. So, which means, and that's one of the channels that has the fastest CAGR. I'm purely talking from numbers. Now, what in digital marketing probably is the future of it that we all need to be cautious or excited about. I think there will be, like I said, I think a lot more experiments, a lot of algorithms will evolve. But in my view, currently some of the algorithms are great, but some of them are disappointing in terms of how the goal seek certain campaign objectives. So, in my view, I think the future of digital marketing is where it comes closer to linking itself to the business objective, and the campaign, which can be omni-channel, delivers the business outcome. So I think it's very kind of, I know it's kind of a bit of a journey for us, but in terms of ask me from a skill or a talent point of view, I think a lot of brands and companies are looking to insource this as a skill, which means that there's a lot of investment that will happen in talent, tools, knowing the ways of working in digital. So in my view, that's a really a bright future if someone is looking at digital marketing as a career, irrespective of the industry, whether you're working in agency or on the brand. I think there is a bright future there.
Okay, great. Thanks for answering, Govind. Coming on to the another question, which is from Shri Harsha. He asked how to find relevant spokes when you have multiple spokes in large organization. अब वोडाफोन की बात कर लेते हैं मुझे वोडाफोन को रीच आउट करना है मैं क्या करूं so I think that's more on that note.
Yeah, and seriously, maybe if you allow me, I think I'll probably narrate it using an example, and that's from my
Yeah.
past. So there was a great partnership we did with an insurance company, with Aviva, and we bundled the life insurance with postpaid in mobile and for
Hmm.
corporates. So, and typically the mobile purchase happens by the administrators or the one who governs the facilities. In small companies, it's the proprietor himself or herself.
Yeah.
But in your product and the buying journey, you realize that there are certain people who are decision makers, some of them are influencers. So in this particular case, it was very clear to us that the HR of the company has as a say in the purchase, because you're talking about insurance and employee welfare. Now, some of the products will force you to naturally think about which are the other centers that you want to go and influence, even if though they may not buy. So naturally, I think if you have an excellent sales guy, I think there's a great program that we run called Winning Complex Sales. It just tells you to map the account to say uh, who are your influencers, decision makers, etc. And I think there's a scientific approach. I would say I'm not the best guy to answer it in a prescriptive manner, but yes, I can put you in touch with some of the excellent guys I reckon as great sales guys, and they can probably guide you a little more. But yeah,
That's great.
it's not difficult, but it's a bit of a hard work.
So basically अगर लोगों को reach out करना है तो they can reach out to you to learn or talk about more about their journey or sales में अगर कुछ पूछना है या marketing में कुछ पूछना है तो you're open to connecting with them, they can reach out to you.
Absolutely, Nitin. I think one thing that your platform does well, I think, is connect with the bright minds, and I think why lose the opportunity to talk and engage? So it's I'm quite open. Yeah.
Great, thank you. ठीक है तो हम एक काम करते हैं अब we are just wrapping up the session but आपसे last 10-11 मुझे रैपिड फायर क्वेश्चंस पूछने हैं, जिसमें आपको ज्यादा नहीं सोचना है और वन वर्ड आंसर देने हैं, ठीक है? आर यू रेडी फॉर द रैपिड फायर राउंड? मैं करण जौहर तो
अरे
नहीं
मा
हूँ और मेरे पास कोई हैम्पर भी नहीं है, बट कोशिश जरूर
I,
कर सकता हूँ।
Nitin, I told you that marketing needs space and time. You're not giving me both, but
तो
yeah,
अभी
let's
वही
give
तो
it a try.
वही देखना है ना कि उसके कॉन्टिन्यूम में क्या होता है। एनीवेज, सो आई एम जस्ट स्टार्टिंग द रैपिड फायर राउंड। आप मुझे बताइए, डू इट ऑल और गेट इट डन।
Get it done.
ओके, क्वांटिटी और क्वालिटी,
Quality.
ट्रेनिंग फ्रेशर्स और रिक्रूटिंग एक्सपीरियंस पीपल,
I think I will cheat on this answer. Both.
ओके, हार्ड वर्क और स्मार्ट वर्क,
Hard work.
वर्क फ्रॉम होम और ऑफिस,
Work from anywhere, if
ओके,
that is
10
allowed.
टू ओके 10 to 6 जॉब और फ्लेक्सिबल आवर्स,
9 to 6, surely. 10 to 6. Yeah.
ओके, इनबाउंड और आउटबाउंड लीड,
Ah, tough question. Inbound, so that I earn my salary.
ओके, इंसेंटिव और नो इंसेंटिव,
Incentive, surely.
कोल्ड ईमेल और कोल्ड कॉलिंग,
Cold calling, more personal.
ओके, सेल्स और मार्केटिंग।
Nitin, you're asking a tough question.
देखिए,
um,
हैम्पर तो सिर्फ तभी मिलता है, आप सीधा सीधा जवाब देने वाले को हैम्पर कहाँ मिलता है? यही तो करण
no,
जौहर
I
से
think
सीखा है हमने।
to those who come to kind of learn bit of marketing, I would think definitely marketing, Nitin. It's a great growth driver. You have to earn the seat, but I think excellent career out there.
ओके, लास्ट क्वेश्चन, मनी या फिर रिकॉग्निशन एंड प्रमोशन?
The answer varies by the stage of the career, but yeah,
क्या
right now,
अभी जिस
um,
स्टेज पे हो आप उसकी बात करते हैं।
chalo recognition and the other part.
Promotion. Okay, great, great. That wraps up our rapid fire round. Thank you so much for answering so candidly, uh, and thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of this LinkedIn live session and the video podcast that we're doing. Baki, if you have anything to share or say to the audience, please go ahead and do that.
No, I will just take this opportunity to thank you, Nitin. An excellent, candid conversation. I kind of you look out for these refreshing opportunities to be out there and meet some of the bright minds. So look forward to engaging with some of you who are there as an audience who are keen. But thanks again, Nitin, to you and your team.
Great. Thank you so much for being here once again. And for people who wish to connect with Govind, I will be adding his LinkedIn profile link in the session. See LinkedIn page, you will be able to see his link. You can connect with him, reach out to him, and he'll be happy to help you in any way he can, of course, provided it's in his purview. And and thank you so much once again, audience, for listening and tuning into this session. And see you soon.
Yeah, stay safe, stay connected. Cheers.
Stay safe. Thank you.
Bye bye.